So I will record the meeting if you guys don't mind. Okay, I suggest that we start, and then I hope that our two more panelists will be joining in the meantime. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. We're having the panel on the best strategy to scale your B2B sales in the United States and from abroad, and how we see companies help you to actually do it. And first, we have a panel discussions with venture capitalists, and we will ask them to introduce themselves. And then we have a case study with Roger Casals, who will share with us his actual experience and how he did it, and is it possible at all if you are not born in the United States to actually succeed there. And so I will say a few words about Astra Global. Astra Global is a global business development and fundraising company. It helps startups to increase B2B sales and to fundraise globally. And me personally, my name is Elena Gusakova. I'm a founder of Astra Global. I studied both in the US and Europe, and I believe in the growth of technology without borders. And we have as our mission bringing together the best technologies and investors worldwide. So let us ask our panelists introduce themselves. Adam, maybe you will introduce yourself first.
Sure. Hi, good to see you, Elena. Thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it. Nice to see everybody. Adam Dakin. I'm a partner with Dreamit Ventures, Philadelphia-based venture fund. Focused almost exclusively on digital health and medical devices. We target late seed Series A, $75 million fund. It's our fourth fund, been around for about 13 years. But what's really unique and different about us compared to other funds is we built out a fantastic stakeholder network. Now includes about 70 US enterprise healthcare systems, about another 20 payers and health plans and integrated delivery networks, and then, about a dozen or so big pharma partners, where we're very fortunate to get our startups to the front of the line to speak with decision makers within the organizations. And to the point of this discussion, that helps accelerate the sales cycle, because just getting meetings with those decision makers sometimes, can take months and months, and we circumvent and accelerate that entire sales process.
Okay, thank you so much. Ihar.
Hi, I'm a managing partner of Geek Ventures. It's a New York-based pre-seed fund. We invest in early-stage startups founded by immigrants coming to the US. So we specifically seek out those who are born outside of the US and either already in the US or are still planning to go to the US. And we invest in the best of them and help them to establish here and get next rounds of funding, and also, of course, the improve in their product, improve in their sales, partnerships, and so on.
Thank you, Scott.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to be here. So I have probably two different jobs that are relevant to the topic here. So I am running Comeback Capital, which is an early stage venture fund devoted to startups that are located outside of the centers of venture capital in the US, that is outside of San Francisco, New York City, the Silicon Valley, and Boston. Our LPs for that model are largely large coastal venture capital funds and high net worth individuals throughout the middle of the country looking for deal flow. The reason that's relevant here is a very large number of the companies that we have are and structured. By that I mean Toronto, and then they end up in Ohio, or they're in France, and then in addition in Kansas City, right? So that's the first part. The second part is that I am an entrepreneur in residence for an organization in Northeast Ohio called the Youngstown Business Incubator, which has a formal program to attract foreign early stage companies, primarily in B2B SaaS, to the state of Ohio. So those are the two things that are probably relevant here.
Great. Isaac, hi.
Hi, and I apologize for the sound in the line. I'm in a big meeting, and apologies for that. Yes, this is Isaac de la Peña, managing partner at Conexo Ventures. We're a 50 million euro fund, and what we do is we help entrepreneurs from across Europe and Latin America to grow and set foot in US and be able to globalize their already successful businesses in what is the deepest and most interesting capital market in the world.
Okay, Roger, maybe you can say a few words about yourself as well.
Sure. I'm born and raised in Barcelona. I've been living in California, in the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area for 14 years. I'm a serial or parallel entrepreneur, as I like to put it. I had 5 successful failures. I had 5 exits. One of them, the one that we will be sharing a bit of it, Password Bank, sold to Symantec, one of the companies in the Bay Area.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And okay, let's start our discussion. So the first question is like, how often do you work with startups which are, let's say, not US incorporated? And how do you kind of bring them to the US, or do you actually expect them to be already in the US and to have first sales in the US? How do you guys start working with such companies? You just, whoever wants to talk, you just share your views.
I mean, I can go ahead and share our approach to this. So our philosophy is that if the company is from overseas and they have no existing customers in the US and no organized reason to be there, they're not relevant to us. But if what happens is you have a company that is located somewhere else and they have their first pilot customers, and they happen to be, the first pilot customers like Rockwell Automation in Cleveland or Milwaukee or something like that, and they need to serve the customer, then we would go through a whole set of things in having to do with the legal structure, visa assistance, getting them funding, etc. But the key cutoff is, are they just a bunch of people spamming us because they want money and access in the US, in which case we're going to say no, or is there a real reason why we could be helpful?
Great. So did I get it right that it's not necessarily that they have a legal structure in the US, but it's necessary for you that they have already first kind of customers in the US?
Correct. Like if there's no reason, the question is, why do you want to be in the middle of wherever we are operating in the US? It's got to have to do with customers and operations for us to say that. Now, we will not make an investment in something that, unless the company is a Delaware C Corp parent of whatever foreign entity it is. But we have done this several times. We will set up, help them with the lawyers to get the Delaware C Corp parent set up. And in fact, if they're in Israel or Canada, places where we know and done this a lot of times, we will even be able to protect their R&D tax credits that they're getting in the home country there. But I'm just trying to draw a big distinction between, every day my inbox is full of probably 20 foreign companies that just are like, you have money in the US, we want it. And that just goes to immediately to zero. But the few that are positive are, our customer happens to be Nationwide Insurance in Columbus, Ohio. They're our first customer, and we have having trouble serving them from I don't know, from Sao Paulo.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may add,
Sure.
That's great, Scott. And those 20 emails that you receive are the ones that are relevant to me, because that's precisely what our fund does, right? We take entrepreneurs that are outside of US, companies outside of US, and we help them set foot in US. But you're absolutely right. US is a big promise. You can get big raises, big funds, big customers, but it's also very expensive and very competitive to operate. So we follow a 3 criteria filter when we try to engage and decide which company we want to support. The first one is this relevant to US? Because the culture, the market, the consumer in US is not the same across the world. And that ideas that work in other geographies that not necessarily will work in US, or opportunities are already taken, right? There's a lot of tropicalization going on in which startups copy models that have worked in US. Well, guess what? That's great to get started fast, but then that precludes you from going to US because you're going to be hitting your head against something much bigger. Then the second one is, will this entrepreneur really work in US? Because again, this culture gap is difficult. If you have been grown in a culture that operates this business differently, and you are of a certain age, those things are very difficult to learn. So for instance, entrepreneurs that were educated in US went back to their countries and started entrepreneuring. That's great because they understand the context. And the last one that we check is what's the baggage the company comes with? Because even when you reincorporate to Delaware and you move to an office in San Jose, the threshold of trust that you have to cross to have a US investor investing in this company is higher. So if the cap table is very fragmented, or they have some grants, some credits that force them to be located in an area outside of US, that's going to be very hard for them to justify. The scrutiny is just much higher when you come from abroad.
And did I get you right that it's not necessary for you, let's say, for the company to have the first US customer, so you can evaluate it yourself if it's possible, or you're looking for companies that already have customers?
That is a great indication that there's a market interest and opportunity, but it's not necessary for us. We also help them close those first deals and get a foothold in terms of customers in US.
Okay.
So you're raising sort of two separate issues. So one is the US incorporation issue. And for our fund, we can't invest unless the company's either an Israeli or a US corp. Unfortunate, but it really is because we're a small fund and we don't have an accounting team that can figure out the nuances in the tax laws and be able to account, for all the different taxation rules and policies in other countries. So if the company's fully committed or that inversion is in process, then we can do it. But there has to be a very clear commitment and plan to do the inversion. As far as establishment in the US, we're generally looking for proof points. We're a late seed Series A investor, and our value add as an investor is we're going to put jet fuel in your engine, but the engine runs, it works, and it's ready to scale. That's our value add. So we're looking for proof points around US scalability. And those can be varied. I mean, if you've got customers in the US, perfect. And you have momentum and a pipeline, that's even better. A lot of the companies don't, but there's a strong signal. They've gotten some initial traction, they've gotten some strong interest, and really importantly, they understand that the US market is very different. It's an entirely different go-to-market strategy most of the time. And so success in other markets doesn't necessarily correlate or predict success in the US market. We're very focused on health tech. So, if you haven't done a US EHR integration, for example, that's a red flag because you integrated with a health system in another country doesn't at all make it any easier to integrate, with the Cerner and the Epics of the world, which may be critical to your, to launching your product in the US. And I think founders, often international founders, just sort of minimize, or they think that that experience is fully transferable to the US market. And typically, we have this fragmented payment system, we have lots of different payers. So it's not really transferable, but we're looking for some proof points that you have a platform that is scalable in the US, and then we'll help you scale even faster by getting you in front of lots and lots of customers.
So you basically need first customers or first clients in the US, like the company to start operations.
Yeah, it just depends how you define a customer. A successful POC is good enough, even if they're not yet writing a check, but they loved it. It's going through the contracting process. They've budgeted for it. You can have a pretty robust pipeline with a lot of momentum without actually having signed contract or customer revenues. So it's just being able to convince ourselves that it works and somebody's actually willing to buy it.
Okay. Ihar, What?
Right. Yeah. So we love our companies to have US focus, and not only love, we require. And we require our companies to be Delaware registered, right? So we see quite a lot of companies who registered elsewhere and want to do the flip. And basically, what I see is that flip could be complicated and complex. So we always say that if you want to get a US venture ecosystem to invest in you, then do the flip. Don't wait for any investor to give you a term sheet or something. Just do the flip as soon as you can. And then after they did the flip, or if they had Delaware registration all the way, then we are potentially could invest. Another thing is that for us, it's important that they actually tried to sell on the US market. I completely agree with Adam that the US sales are very, very different, right? So there are so many things that could go wrong that you think, you learned in other markets and it will just work in the US, and it will not, right? So it's important to, as soon as you can in your company existence, to actually try to sell in the US. And then when we see what is important to us to see that your product is not like US phobic, right? So in the sense that it's not that your product works elsewhere but doesn't work in the US. So it's important that you show at least some premise, some proof that your product works for US customers, and you just need to put fuel on the fire, right? So it's that's where we expect the CEO or maybe other founders already tried selling in the US and got 1 or 2 sales at least successfully, and then they need to hire salespeople in the US, because you have to have US salespeople to sell to US market. So, but you also cannot, but you also very clearly, you cannot move to hire US salespeople if CEO never did a single sale in the US personally. What I think is that even if CEO is not American, right, and we work with non-American CEOs all the time, they should try to negotiate the first 1 or 2 sales themselves, to have some sort of playbook and some understanding of issues before they go to hire salespeople that understand the market, but obviously are less connected to the product than CEO is.
There was
Yeah,
a
I
little
want to-
moral wisdom in there, just quickly, that I think make sure we don't gloss over. Is really important what Ihar said. That if you're going to commercialize in the US and you're going to raise capital in the US, just commit and do the flip. What we hear all the time from startups is exactly what Ihar said. When we get a lead US investor, then we'll do the flip. And a lot of times we're like, well, come back later, because, you're not, if you're fully committed to this, take the pain. There's always tax issues in doing these inversions that existing investors don't like, but you're going to raise capital in the US, you're going to commercialize in the US, just do the inversion.
I think
So,
there's
sorry, Scott, please more.
So there's a broader philosophical question here that I think a lot of people are hitting on, which is, why should this company be in the US? And the model usually of a non-US company being in the US is there's a good reason to build whatever product it is in another country, because the tech talent is less expensive or better or something like that, and they come up with a really good solution. But the customers who really need this sit in the US, and so that's where sales and needs to be fairly early on. If that's the philosophy, so the CTO is going to sit in whatever home country it is, either the CEO is moving or the sales operation, the CEO is coming a lot, that's there. But why? What's the proof point that that model is going to work? The proof point is somebody actually sold the first 2 or 3 business customers in the US, and they're buying it and they're saying, yes, we need it. And then the legal structure is, well, then the US investors want the US entity they're investing in because they're comfortable with the US tax and corporate law, and therefore that's the structure, and you should go do that. But if the philosophy is just America has a lot of money, therefore we should go raise it there and we'll do it when we have the money, then it's very hard to convince people in the US to go along with that.
Roger.
Yes, I wanted to say a couple of things on that regard, from another perspective, not from the investor perspective, from the entrepreneur perspective, because we always forget, and I hope that there are some entrepreneurs here in the room, guys, plan for success, because Delaware yes, Delaware no, etc. It's fine, but it's case by case. Some cases, in my case, for example, we landed in US and we never did the flip for several reasons that I'll explain. The problem many times not doing the Delaware flip is entrepreneurs never plan for success. They try hard, but they never basically plan financially. What if we make a big splash, we sell the company, we go IPO, whatever, okay? And by the time that you realize, hey, I should take care of where should I be living, where the company should be sitting in, whether it's in Vancouver or San Jose or San Francisco, then it's too late to fix it. So to be aware that this can go well and you can make a lot of money, and you want to be tax, you want to have some tax optimization, you have to plan ahead that move as well, not only because it makes sense. So in my experience, moving to US was the best thing that we could ever do, because our product was designed basically for American customers, and we did exactly what Scott was mentioning. So we basically raised a few customers first before we actually decided to move to US and open and hire the whole, full-fledged US American, what I call NANs, Native American native speakers, okay? Because it's a totally different thing. We don't speak English, we fake it. You need actual US-born people that actually speak English, that can understand the nuances of the language when they say yes, that they meant no. But you have to come to US, sell your first customers to prove that there's a reason to be here, and then you're good to do everything. Then case by case, you decide whether you need to do the Delaware flip or not. It depends whether you need US money or not, because the best money that you can raise in US is customers, because customers are really big in US. Okay.
And the question now is for those entrepreneurs, many of whom are here, who probably didn't move to the US yet. Like, let's say, how do you do your first sale in the US? What kind of examples did you mention? How do you do your first sales? And when you don't have money, you don't have salespeople, you don't speak English, the same way as I do. So basically, you don't speak in their language, let's say, whatever it includes, like the cultural, mental, whatever stuff. How do you do this first magic sales, after which you can start your engine running? I mean, the company incorporation is a legal thing. I mean, it can be done at any time. Should you really move into the US, or you can do it from abroad?
Well, it depends on the product, right? In our case, we had a few sales before we actually moved to US. We moved the whole company to US, besides R&D. R&D always stayed in Barcelona, but the sales, marketing, etc., was moved to US after a few customers. How? Well, trying very hard. Depending on whether you are a SaaS product or a more consulting intensive product that needs a lot of implementation, it depends. It's easier if you have a pure SaaS product. Actually.
And what do you guys say? How do you do this first sale, this first most difficult sale in the US?
Well, I think there's a step before that. If you're just, hey, I'm going to come to the US, I'm going to figure out how to get my first sale, you're kind of jumping the shark here, because what you have to do first is deep customer discovery. You better just talk to these future customers and try to get a deep understanding into the problem you're trying to solve for them, how your solution potentially aligns. Chances are you're going to have to make some changes to that solution. And so that's where you want to spend your time and effort initially, because if you go out, you know, with the attitude like, hey, this is awesome, let's commercialize, there's a good chance you're going to meet with a lot of resistance up front, and you'll get, you know, and you may get a false negative because you didn't really sort of refine the value proposition and understand the customer needs before you went out and started selling.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with that. So I think it's important that you come with open mind that the market might not be ready for your exact product, right? But yeah, so, and I think the one end all that always works is try to find people in your network to sell to, even if they are not perfect customers, but they're people that you know, and hopefully can rely on their direct feedback. That would help a lot.
So we
Sorry, go ahead.
we search explicitly for particular non-US founding teams that have somebody on this team. So one of the team members went to college at a US school, right? They went to Purdue, they went to Georgia Tech, right? So they lived there, and during school, they were an engineer, they had an internship at some US company, so they have some insight there. Frankly, they were an au pair and lived for 2 years watching somebody's children in the US, also is super helpful there in that model. One of those team members, then that problem, then that the initial sale is made somehow by that person or the initial customer contacts. We have not seen this. I'm sure it exists probabilistically, but we think it's pretty rare that a person with no US contacts just comes to the US and somehow makes the first sale on the basis of their product and gets in. We don't bet on that because it's too hard to find.
I don't disagree, but I have experiences of that happening, and that's a very strong positive of future success. I mean, Roger is a great example of somebody selling from Spain, and true, it's very different selling a SaaS to the internet than selling a medical device, you need consultation and boots on the ground. We also have this example, this company that is in Seville, in southern Spain, where you would only expect to have pitch and bullfighting, and they have great technology. They have this wireless solution that the CEO, networking through friends and colleagues, and with his broken English, he managed to sell to the railway in New York, in the line New York-Stanford. The Wi-Fi is created by this company. So for us, this was a strong indicator to invest, right? So there are cases, they're few and apart, but that can happen. Also, I would like to add that if you're a company, the world has changed a lot. 10 years ago, it would be impossible. But if you're a more mature company, not a seed company, but a Series A company, there's a lot of investing interest in US that will go to your country and invest in you in your country pre-relocation and help you get to US. So it's not a binary thing that you need to be in US to get the funding. Hopefully things have changed, and there's a lot of more openness for funds, I would say Series A and beyond, to look for deal flow beyond the borders of US.
Okay, thank you. And for example, you already invested in the company and you have the first US sales. How do you help those companies scale in the US, and what, let's say, what helps the most? Like doing partnerships, knowing people personally, doing marketing. I understand it depends from project to project, but anyways, any cases of success, like what do you think is working in the US to scale your B2B sales?
Well, I can explain something that I learned. I had during Password Bank, my tenure at Password Bank, I had several aha moments, and one of them was interesting. I met with Robin Bassan, a well-known VC investor from Mayfield Ventures, and he was contacting me because he was interested in merging my company with one of his investments because we had a special technology, blah, blah, blah. And he was very concerned about our sales, the way we were selling in US, okay? We were more traditional B2B consulting kind of company. And he basically made me in 15, 20 minutes a masterclass of how to sell in US. I actually took notes because it was amazing. One of the things that and again, this works for certain companies, this is not a model that everyone should apply. In my case, it applied. But basically he said, instead of trying to, you don't have much money, so you cannot hire a super big team, sales team, let the product talk by itself. So they basically recommended me an approach, a freemium kind of approach. So give something away for free, very little that you can control, let the product sell by itself. And then once they really need to expand internally that product within their organization, those leads are super qualified. It's a done deal. Okay, so you don't need that many people in sales. The product sells itself. And people there in big companies, there are many people trying stuff. And one of the products that they can try is yours. So that approach worked wonders for us. I actually, after that meeting, I fired 6 people in my sales team. So I was that convinced, and it paid off in our case. Again, one of the aha moments that I had with Password Bank.
Any successful experience from venture capitalists?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what we do and what we think has been successful. Now, keep in mind, we are much earlier than several of the other investors. We're primarily pre-seed investors, right? So we're looking at companies where they literally have 2 pilot customers that are paid and making, like $7,000 a month in revenue, right? Like that's when we're investing. And by the way, we really only do B2B stuff. But so one of the big parts of this is, okay, so you're coming to a particular part of the country because you've got an ag tech product. Well, we know the people at John Deere, right? And part of the big problems with the giant companies is how do you get a meeting? It's really difficult because you get shunted around to the lower levels. So that's a big part of this. But the second thing is going back to the culture piece of this is we work with a lot of headhunters to find the people who are the American salespeople who can bridge the gap to a foreign company that will work for equity, that don't demand high salaries, that are comfortable with commission because they've been successful before and they want to do this because you need it. Like you can't, it's unless you grew up in the US environment, you cannot do those sales well. There's too much bias against those folks. That's the second thing. The third one is helping a lot with the system there, right? So we work with a lot of people who are sales training experts, and they'll just do a lot of the tips of how do you do the open, how do you do the close, what works with the Americans, so how do you get the SDR in the process, how far down the road does the SDR take this in the process. And then I think the fourth one is, and people forget about this, for a non-US company, there are so many things about the conversion to the parent and the maintaining of the US, the foreign subsidiary, the visa issues for people and all of that, and getting people the right advice so that the CEO can worry about how do I get into Rockwell to make a sale, not what's happening with the O1 visa.
Adam?
Sure. Yeah, I can give you an example. One of my favorite companies is a Polish company called Informatica. Informatica has developed a really deep AI sort of symptom tracker and patient triage platform. So it asks a series of questions, mobile, web, really any interaction with the patient, but it's very intelligent about asking the patient for their symptoms in order to direct them to the right point of care, because as all of you know, you're a patient in the US, you can go to retail care clinics, you could go to the ED, you could go to urgent care, you could go to your primary care doctor, you could make an appointment with your specialist, right? You're not really sure necessarily where the right point of care, but somebody has a really strong vested interest in getting you to the right point of care, typically the payer, because they want you to get the right care, but the least costly care. So that's kind of the value prop for Informatica. They were very successful in Europe with a value prop to payers and insurers. But when they came to us and said, hey, okay, we're excited, we want to come into the US market, we spent a lot of time doing exactly what I said before, customer discovery, going out and seeing who would pay for this, what the value prop is, what was the messaging there. We have a very strong health system provider network. Most of our companies are provider facing, though more and more we're seeing payer facing and integrated delivery network facing platforms. Another conversation, because all of a sudden payers have all the money now and providers and health systems are losing money. So they're not as excited to invest in innovation as payers who were wildly profitable during the pandemic. But a company like Informatica, great team, great tech, but really not sure how to enter the US market. So we took them through that sort of customer discovery phase, helped inform their go-to-market, helped inform the messaging, the value proposition, really spent a lot of time going through the pitch. Again, all of you probably know, if you don't lead with an ROI, your conversation in the US now is going to be a really short conversation. So you have to have a defendable ROI story with data and evidence to back it up. And, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do when you haven't commercialized in the US. So you have to extrapolate or make some assumptions, but they got to be defendable. So we spent a lot of time with them figuring that out and then taking them out to our customer network once we had spent that time on the front end, really thinking through what that messaging and the value proposition and the ROI story needed to be. And they're doing terrific. I mean, that company is absolutely crushing it right now.
And how did you do sales? Just by having sales team calling customers? Or?
So we have a very unique model. I don't want to sound like an advertisement for Dreamit, but because we have a network of 70 enterprise healthcare systems and incredibly close relationships with those systems, our value prop back to the startup is that we're going to get you in front of decision makers. You don't need to hire all these sort of experienced salespeople with pre-existing relationships. We're going to get you, once we understand the value prop and who it's going to resonate with, through our network, we're going to navigate to the right decision makers within that healthcare system. And I think it was touched on earlier, but in the beginning, it's really important to have founder-led sales. I mean, you want the founders face-to-face with customers on the steep part of the learning curve, getting the unfiltered insight and feedback, not sort of feeling like, oh, I can hand that off. I just hired a rock star salesperson. They'll figure it out. That's that's an approach that I think most investors don't love.
That's what I want to do.
I want to say something here, because for us was the second aha moment. Sometimes it's the problem is not your sales team. You have the right sales team. You have the right product for the right customers, and you know who and how to target them, and you're creating value. Sometimes, and we forget about that. You have the right product, the right team, but you have the wrong company backing you up. And what I mean is some markets, especially you're mentioning healthcare, unless you have a good enough company behind you and a big enough VC behind you, you're not going to be able to sell. So one of the aha moments that I had with Password Bank was I actually was able to sell to Kaiser Permanente. Kaiser Permanente, for those that are not in US yet, is a huge healthcare company. Okay, and for us it was night and day. It was the deal of a lifetime for us. And well, after a POC, we won, and they said, yes, go ahead. The problem is the manager called me and said, procurement will call you and will make you a few questions so we can get this ball rolling. They made me 12 questions and I answered none of them. I couldn't, because they were concerned about the size of my company, the size of my other customers, the size of my VC, and so on, so on, so on. And I failed all of those questions. You not only have to approach the right customers with the right sales, you have to be prepared. You have to have a company that can back up and can serve those companies. The sentence that stuck with me is, he said, Roger, I cannot buy your product because we kill people here. And it struck a nerve because, yeah, I understood. He said, go sell the company to someone else, and then I'll buy your product with my in a heartbeat. Okay, so sometimes it's not just the product, it's not just the team, it's not just the strategy, it's not just the sales acumen of the CEO, is to have been able to build your company around you so you can actually sell to those big guys.
Interesting. So you need to have kind of strong, solid financial player backing you up, right?
Well, if you're selling to a thousand people company, any small startup will do. If you're selling to a 1 million people company, they need backup. They need to know that you can afford to work with them.
Okay, so you can afford production actually.
Support, you are legit.
Roger is absolutely right, and it's a trust issue, right? And Adam struck on this when he said that he's helping bridging that introduction, and that creates an initial trust. But then in some industries, you require more than that. You require the whole company to be able to back up. I think that's really spot on.
And for example, like apart from meeting decision makers, what do you think about other kind of sales methods, like creating partnerships and direct marketing, or I don't know, all sorts of social campaigns? Did they ever work, or they don't work for startups in B2B?
I have two thoughts on that. First, it's really hard to put two startups together. It's hard enough to do one thing well, let alone to try to get two early stage companies to collaborate, co-market, co-sale. So a lot, we see founders all the time getting enthusiastic because, hey, we're really synergistic, but often doesn't work out well because neither one has the resources or the bandwidth to really focus on the relationship. And then as far as other channel partners, big companies, partnering, small startups partnering with big companies, it's a little bit of a catch-22 because usually the big channel partner is not going to want to work with you till you have proof points, referenceable customers. They're not going to put their credibility, their reputation, their brand on the line for a startup unless they're really confident that your product works as advertised and delivers real, not only value to the customer, but strategic value to them. And so it's, well, it always sort of reminds me of that joke of, the two happiest days in a boat owner's life, right, is the day the boat owner buys the boat and the day the boat owner sells the boat. The two happiest days in an entrepreneur's life is the day he signs the big co-distribution deal with a large company and the day he dissolves it, because most of them don't. Most of these co-marketing distribution deals, they don't work out.
So, okay, great. Maybe you will save a lot of time to our startups, not trying to do co-marketing. Any other thoughts on that?
And also related to that, many startups follow the channel strategy in which they say, okay, there's this vendor in US that has many of my potential customers. Let me do a sale through them. Let me do an agreement and sell through the channel. That's okay, but it's hard to work. Those relationships are hard to create. The agreements are hard to make. Doesn't guarantee you're going to sell. And in some cases, we have instances of the channel replicating the product and replacing the provider. So actually stealing right there IP from the company. So I'm not saying you shouldn't try it, but just be aware of the risks. It's not a silver bullet that is going to save all your problems.
And what about social marketing? Do you suggest the B2B companies to do social marketing, to be active in news, whatever stuff, or it doesn't make any sense?
My 5 cents, and I would love to hear other people, other experiences. Social marketing works well for B2C companies. For B2B companies, don't expect that to bring you customers. It's going to create general awareness about your brand. It's going to make you put in front of people who are going to be interested in your brand. It's not going to bring you customers. It needs to be more targeted. And if you can potentially get somebody to do interactions with you, like Adam was saying, that's the best way you can get into a hot lead. Social marketing, I don't think it works for B2B.
So I guess from a B2B perspective, if I'm thinking about foreign companies that we've had a lot of success with that have entered the US, usually there's lots and lots of strikes against them. And the thing that they have is that they literally have a much better solution to the customer's problem, a much better value proposition than anyone else. And the main obstacle they have is they can't get to the decision maker on the customer side, particularly if it's enterprise, to show them that it's a better solution. The social media stuff doesn't help with that. It's like literally the really key thing is the opening the doors so that people will take a half an hour to hear that this thing that's coming from, somewhere else that they've never heard of, and they see the demo and they're like, oh my gosh, that piece of software is so much better than the junk we've been using, right? Like, why have you not talked to us? And what the entrepreneur can never say is, I've been trying for a year, but no one would take a meeting.
Okay. Great. And share with us, like, what was the worst mistake your portfolio startup ever made, for example? Because usually it's hard, it's good to share success, but like sharing mistakes is very useful for other people in terms of sales. We're talking about sales.
Well, I'll tell you one common mistake that we see I don't know if it qualifies as the worst mistake, but it definitely qualifies as a common mistake, which is trying to hire a single person to run marketing and sales, and thinking like, I got this rock star who can do both. And it's our experience anyway, that those are different skill sets. And I can't tell you how many times we've seen that person get fired. I mean, hiring good salespeople is really hard. I mean, the VP, the head of, commercialization, head of sales, is a position that a lot of startups screw up on their first 1 or 2 attempts. There's just so many of our portfolio companies who hired the wrong salespeople to begin with, because they didn't really understand the profile of the right salesperson. They just made some assumptions and quickly hired. Didn't work out so good. So, being super thoughtful about who the right person is to head up your sales effort and what the profile of your salespeople should be is really important. But thinking that you can hire this one superhuman who's very strategic thinker, who can do the marketing and the go-to-market strategy, and that's going to be the same sort of, dragon slayer salesperson who knows how to get deals closed. It's just very rare that skill set resides in one individual.
Great sample. I like it.
So I would tell another mistake that we have seen happen a lot is that foreign entrepreneurs think that if they go to New York City or they go to San Francisco, they've gone to the US for products that are not generally sold in those places, and it's a terrible mistake. So if you're going to sell software primarily to manufacturers, or you're going to sell an ag tech product, the idea that you're going to go and find the salesperson in New York City and that's going to work is a mistake, because the New York City-based salesperson is generally unlikely to know how you sell ag tech products in Indiana, right? And how you sell, trucking logistics things in Omaha. And that's the naivete about the variation in the US, I think, is a mistake.
Interesting. Also
And
interesting cultural stuff.
I want to say something else, especially for those entrepreneurs that are foreigners, okay? Every single one, and I experienced that myself, every single one entrepreneur that I talked to suffered the same disease, okay? You come to US, you start creating your team, you start having meetings with candidates for your sales position, and every single time, you get the same feeling. Oh, how fortunate we are, this guy is available. Every single time. They do speak English, so they look smarter than you are. They have the ability of, do the name dropping, okay? They name drop names of people or, titles or even companies, okay? And they have the ability on top of that to sell themselves. This is a particular skill set that we foreigners, people that is not born in US, we do not have, okay? We do not know how to sell ourselves most of the time. So do not hire the first guy that you think that, is the right guy for the job. Because if you interview a second one, you will get the same feeling. If you interview someone, the third one, you will get the same feeling as before. So you need to learn how to hire in US, which is very, very different from, because you don't have that acumen, you don't have that sense on how to hire in US, how to know what's good, what's bullshit.
Interesting. And what is the right moment when you hire your first sales director or salesperson? Probably you hire it at certain moment later. When is it? When you have certain amount of sales or customers, number of customers, or when you earn more than you can pay to this good salesperson, or what is the right moment to hire top salespeople?
I mean, it depends a little bit on the nature of the product. So when we're talking about a, let's say, $50,000 a year B2B SaaS product, for instance, we don't believe that a company has product market fit until they've got 10 to 12 of those customers. And we feel like the founder needs to be heavily involved in the sales until that point. And so the idea that somebody has one customer and then they say, I'm going to go hire that salesperson, they have no idea whether that's the segment, because until you get to 10 to 12, you're like, oh, like our decision modeling software seems to work only with physical products manufacturers or only with hospitals or whatever. And they hadn't figured that out until they hit 10 to 12, pilot customers. So I think the sales thing has to be after you have product market fit, and the founders should be doing the sales until then.
Okay. Roger, so basically maybe you can share really briefly your success story, and then we kind of come to audience questions.
Sure, happy to. So as I said, I built a company, Password Bank. The company is irrelevant what we did. We basically were in the cybersecurity spectrum. And I created the company, and according to my wife, I created the company basically to have an excuse to move to the Bay Area, okay? Because it was like a pipe dream that I had in my bucket list long ago. But the truth is, we created a company, we created a product that was well suited for big corporations. We were competing against IBM, Oracle, and such companies, okay? We were feeling, and this is important for any entrepreneur, knowing the market. This is something that I found many times. People do not analyze the competitor landscape, and they miss the point, okay? We knew and we nailed, I think, what holes were we were feeling against those big guys. My biggest mistake was, as I said before, we were aiming too high. We were a very small pre-seed startup, very small. We never raised VC capital in US. We never needed. I invested myself. I was the biggest VC in the firm. We had a small VC firm just to be able to get public funds. That's something that we managed to do very well in Spain. And when we moved here, I missed the point, because I moved to US, I did all the dance, I discovered what a credit score is, how difficult it is to, you know, get a rent in US, buy a car, etc. Okay, so you need to have at least twice the budget that you expected initially to be able to succeed, for two reasons. One is because everything is much more expensive than you think. And second, because you will fail hiring the first batch of a team of members, okay? Because you don't know how it works, how to hire people in US. And we came here after we had a few customers already. We managed, basically traveling a lot, we managed to sign 3 or 4 deals with customers in US. And that was what made me think, okay, we have a product market fit. We don't have a company in US. In order to be able to scale, we need to be there, okay? So that's why I decided to move the company in US. And then I hired a team. Then I had to fire the whole team and hire a new sales team. They did an amazing job. Again, we were selling a lot of products for public sector, which is a very tricky one, and other cybersecurity companies, related customers. And we were aiming at big Department of Transportation, Department of Education, Kaiser Permanente. One of the biggest and most interesting customers that we managed to get was Parexel, the one that is managing all the clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, okay? And we were managing security for 20,000 plus people. It was a challenging thing, but it was a very good, because that success brought in more customers. And so we were kind of thriving up until the moment I realized that selling to big guys like Kaiser Permanente was impossible because of the size of the company. They basically neglected us. They said, we cannot buy from you. So I decided to change my strategy, especially after talking to Robin Bazan and explaining me that strategy. So we flipped immediately. Instead of a consulting sales approach, we started doing this B2B online approach, freemium kind of thing. I give you something for free, you try it. If you want to scale, you have to pay. And at the same time, the Kaiser Permanente thing made me realize that I had no money to be able to do the whole flip towards from a consulting sale to a B2B online sale, okay? So I decided to sell the company, okay? And it was another interesting process, how to sell a company in US. Hiring an M&A boutique to do the whole dance with big corporations. We already had some letter of intent from several companies, okay, Oracle, IBM, Symantec, Gemalto, etc. So we did that dance. At that time, we were already selling. We were successful with that strategy, that flip, that move from consulting to cloud-based sales, okay? But my decision to sell the company was clear, because in order to speed up and compete with those big giants, Oracle, IBM, etc., we were not going to be able to be successful without a big round of investment. And the conversations that I had with VCs at that time were not were more dilutive than selling the company at that time. So from an economic perspective, for me, made a lot of sense to sell the company, cash in, and start a new venture.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. So probably thank you for the discussion. We will move to audience questions, and some of our investors will need to leave. But anyways, guys, if we don't answer all the questions, we will ask them afterwards, and I'm sure they will be replying if something is needed. So basically, what do you think about LinkedIn and Twitter as sales channels in the US? Do you have some tips for pre-seed companies? So how do you generally, I would say, make first contacts with your first US customers?
So my opinion that Twitter is very weird as a sales channel, but LinkedIn is absolutely valid sales channel. So actually doing cold reach outs through LinkedIn Sales Navigator is the right approach in the US, and companies react well to that. Of course, the conversion is far from 100%, but it works. Another thing is, of course, warm intros on conferences. So conferences or networking events in person in the US. So basically, that's what I expect founders that I invest in, that they fly into the US to reasonably connected to their business conferences and try to strike conversations over there and get warm intros. Yeah.
And Roger, you said that LinkedIn never worked for you. How did you manage to obtain your first customer?
Believe it or not, what worked for us was our product was, again, this depends on who are you selling to, okay? Our product was a very technological product. So we were selling to nerds. We were selling to techies. So we were basically adding ads into Google into Google AdWords, okay? Because when they were asking something related to what we solve, they found us and they tried us, and then here it comes. That's the way it started. Because reaching out the right people, many are using LinkedIn, and usually you get a rejection despite that you nailed the right guy, because they are bombarded, okay? So letting them ping you back is the best way. So instead of approaching them through LinkedIn, what worked, at least for us, was showing off in Google AdWords that we had that such product.
Interesting. And another question, in general, what is the view on having to move to USA production for products that are being sold or leased, especially with regards to achieving investments from US-based VCs? Like, do you need to move production to the US?
If I can take that, please don't. I mean, that's insane. Unless you have some requirement, legal requirement, FDA, some clearance, don't move production there. And I think, I assume that was understood in this conversation, but when we say move the company to US, we're talking about incorporation and maybe a head office, maybe having there your sales team, your CEO, maybe your CFO, if you have investors in US, but that's it. Salaries are crazy expensive. There's no reason to be there. Actually, what we always try is to have the superpower of turning a weakness, that is that you are not US originary or US native company, to a superpower that is you sell there, but you produce elsewhere. And with production, we're talking about warehouses, factories, but we're also talking about people, engineers that are very talented, very expensive, and you can find them in other geographies for a fraction of the cost. So if you manage to have this situation of producing elsewhere and selling in US, That is your superpower. And that puts you in front of most companies in US. Actually, nowadays, I get pitched a lot in US by US native companies saying, oh, our superpower is that we have people in Kenya, we have people in India, we have people in Peru, in Colombia. So that's selling to me my pitch, which is very interesting. So definitely don't move the production to US.
Great. Okay, interested in hearing observations on how war in Ukraine is affecting VC sphere. There are a few founders definitely from post-Soviet countries trying to enter US market, especially Ukrainian and Russian founders. So how the war affected those investments into those founders?
I can take this because we work a lot with the founders from Ukraine and Russia. So the most affected, so first of all, you know, Ukraine is obviously most affected as a country, right? So, and that's most important to talk about. From investment perspective, Ukrainian companies are affected much less than companies with Russian founders and Russian teams. As somebody wrote here, I think Scott wrote here in the chat, correct, that as long as the teams are in Russia, they will not get Series A funding. They might get some pre-seed, some seed funding, but serious investors will not invest when your employees are in Russia, because even from the beginning of the war, there was clear there were sanctions, but now people were expecting more bad things to come. Now there is mobilization, so maybe your front-end guys or back-end guys are going to be drafted, right? So I'm telling to all founders that reach out to me that as long as you have anybody in Russia, we cannot invest, and very few others will invest. So do what you can to get your people out of Russia, or let them go and hire people outside of Russia. Ukraine is a little different because it depends on the areas of Ukraine. Of course, there is danger still there, and both danger that they might be, anyway, all sorts of danger. And also there is, of course, no air connectivity, right? So they cannot fly in and out because planes don't fly to Ukraine right now. But what I see is that it's very much advised for founders not to be in Ukraine because it's really difficult to raise in this situation. But a team, especially a non-C-level team, can stay in Ukraine, and I don't see this as a problem for fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard, just also want to mention what I've heard, that if you have a board of directors of your Delaware company where one of your board of directors member has a Russian address, be prepared that your Delaware registration will be suspended and you will not be able to get certificate of good standing, and you will not be able to pay taxes in Delaware and so on. So it's if it didn't happen already, because for many companies it happened already. So nobody can have Russian address on the board of directors.
Okay. And for example, what do you think, like, I will ask one more question if there are no more questions from the audience. Basically, what do you think about having somebody from the US as a member of your advisory board, for example? If you don't have any US linked, let's say, founders. Huh?
I can quickly chime in. I personally ignore advisory boards unless it's the only case when advisory board makes any sense is a deep tech startup where founders lack the right experience. For example, the startup is doing mental health and the CEO has no mental health experience, or it's any sort of medical device or any sort of biotech or anything like that, then yes. But unless it's deep tech, just don't do advisory board. It looks corny and it's not important. So,
but for example, for sales, Ihar, what if the guys, they, let's say, they have advisory board members who help with sales, or you don't really have that often?
Try to get them as investors, right? That like, just looks much more serious, right? So if you can say that one of your angel investors is XYZ, is a person that can connect you on sales, that's much stronger signal. Advisory board is often just a, just show of people who don't actually do any work.
There is a question if the investors can be contacted in relation to startup opportunities. Yes, definitely. You can either reach out to them via social profiles, or you can reach out to us and we will connect you to the guys with pleasure. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I like personally the discussion was super helpful, and I hope that you also enjoyed it. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you at our next events, and let's do some more sales and deals together. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for the invite. It was great.
It was a pleasure. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.